Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I've read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's an Oregon personal injury attorney and founder of ELG Injury Lawyers, none other than Mr. Dave Eltringham.
Hi, Daniel.
Welcome, Mr.
Thank
Dave.
you.
Book
Thank you.
101 review, and can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Sure. As mentioned, my name's Dave Eltringham, and I'm the owner of ELG Injury Lawyers. I'm also an attorney. I've been practicing since, 1997. And so I've been doing it for a minute now. And our firm, we handle cases statewide in Oregon. We're also have offices in Florida as well. So we also work in Florida. And so we're on both East Coast and West Coast. And we essentially, what our firm does is we exclusively represent personal injury victims, especially, I like to say anything with wheels. So like, trucks, cars, motorcycles, bicycles, e-bikes, and then a lot of slip and fall, trip and fall kind of stuff. Essentially, we handle cases. We go up against the insurance companies, and we represent victims who are hurt, through the negligence or wrongdoing of others, and that's kind of our role. And we help people, we help our clients, the injured victims, get back on their feet, get them the medical care that they need to get better. We help them on their journey to heal from their injury, and then we look to the insurance companies to get them fair compensation for their injuries.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Dave Eltringham. So today let's talk about how traumatic injury changes lives. So tell us, people see the physical injuries. What was the first psychological or emotional shift you remember that signaled your life had increasingly changed, even before you truly grasped the physical reality?
I think it. The answer is really it really depends on the nature and the type of injuries. So, for example, say orthopedic injuries versus a head injury or a traumatic brain injury, and there's different ways that these injuries typically impact victims. I think that it's difficult to just say like there's any one pattern. I think there's a whole range of very human responses to personal injuries. I think personal injury is personal. It's personal to the victim, and I think how the victim ultimately responds to those injuries is different. Although I think what we see in the range of our practice is, there's I would say, while there's many varied and different responses to traumatic injury, it typically falls within a range, and depending on degree of severity. So I don't know if I answered the question, but
Indeed, Mr. Dave, the identity shatter. And in an instant, you went from being independent person to a patient. How did you begin the process to lose of your former identity, and when did you find the first seeds of a new one?
so you're talking about my own personal experience at this point?
Yeah, please.
Sure. So I was the victim of personal injury. It started back in 2018. I started to feel ill. I didn't know why. And I just got increasingly sicker and sicker. And then by the time 2019 rolled around, I was a very, very sick person, and my doctors had no idea why or what was going on with me. And it took I guess, close to 2 years to figure out the why. But what had happened in my particular case is we had a really big flood in my office, so my law office. And the thing that happened there was the they did not appropriately or properly remediate the water, and there was a lot of water damage in the ceiling above my particular office, my individual office, and that went unchecked and unremediated, and it was invisible. I couldn't see it. And ultimately, I was diagnosed with pretty severe mold poisoning, and came to learn that it was black mold that was inside the ceiling, not visible, couldn't see it. And it was essentially all in the in the insulation and the ventilation. So it was kind of just coming down on me every day as I'd work. And sort of the irony for me is I remember my wife telling me, you just got to work through this. You got to work harder, whatever this is. We don't know what this is, but you have to work harder. And she said, just go roll up your sleeves and go to work. You'll figure out a way. And every day I went to work, I just got that much sicker. And then finally, I was diagnosed pretty much about exactly 2 years after the flood had occurred. And, I had, pretty severe injuries. I had a lot of respiratory issues. And then I also had mold, particularly black mold is a neurotoxin and attacks the brain. So I had, pretty, what they described, as my doctors described, as a water damaged brain, which, as you can imagine, makes it hard to be a lawyer and hard to do your job, and really hard to, run a law firm. And so I went through that, and it took me probably the better part of a couple of years to ultimately recover from the injuries. And at the end of the day, it was negligence, that caused it. Was sort of the irony for me was, here I was, a personal injury lawyer, and then all of a sudden I'm on the other side of it, and I'm realizing that I'm a victim of negligence, the negligence of the remediation company, the negligence of the licensed mold inspectors who came and said, there's nothing wrong with your office. It's in your imagination. The negligence of my doctor, who failed to diagnose me for almost 2 years, with me telling my doctor I think I have mold illness, and even my HOA, who they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So, like, I describe it as an avalanche of negligence that really resulted in very significant injuries. And not only were the injuries significant and kind of just really disrupted my life, but also ultimately just really wreaked havoc on my practice. As I said, I got to a point, let's put it this way, I got to a point where I didn't think I was ever going to be a lawyer again, because that's how sick I was. I didn't even know if I was going to survive. So, it's pretty, the shoe is, on the other foot. And I got to experience firsthand what it was like to be a personal injury victim. And that just completely changed my perspective on not just my life, but my practice and everything that I thought I knew about personal injury.
Well, thank you for that story, Mr. Dave. It's so empowering. So, what was the single most important mental tool or thought you relied on those earliest, darkest days just to get through the next hour or next procedure?
Sure. I think when I reflect back on that time, there were points where I felt like I was giving up. You just get to a point where you're so sick. I had been from my family at the time. My daughter was 3 years old. I'm a relatively new father at that point. The provider, the business runs through me. Everything runs through me. All these people depend on me. They, my employees, my family, and there's this big sphere of people who just really depend on me. And all of a sudden that was taken away from me. And I, not only wasn't I able to provide for my family and be there for my legal team, I couldn't even advocate for myself. So I think that, when I reflect back on it, I think the number one lesson I learned is, even on your darkest day, you got to keep on swinging. You got to keep on fighting. And I think that in those moments where I, literally almost gave it all up, I reflect back on, what a tragic mistake that would have been, because, from my perspective, I was able to ultimately figure out what was wrong with me. I was able to work really hard, regain my health, and then over a period of years was able to really effectively, rebuild my practice from, to back and even beyond where it had been before I got sick. And I think that having a mindset of never ever quitting, never giving up, no matter how hard you get hit, no matter how much it hurts, no matter, what other people are saying about you, never losing sight and believing in yourself, believing in the power to recover and do better. And, ultimately there are some people who do get sick or who do suffer traumatic injuries that are the fault of others that never recover and never get their health back. But I think the vast majority do, in fact, make at least some semblance of a recovery. And from my perspective, that's the thing. If you don't believe that you're going to get better, you're never going to get better. And then I'd say, as a segue to that, the other thing that I realized is, for quite a while, I had what I would call a victim's mindset. And I looked at this as something terrible that had happened to me. And there's a whole psychology that comes along with that kind of negativity and that kind of negative thinking. Whenever we are a victim, it's not a good mental place to be in. And what I realized is that I was missing the opportunity in all of this to find that silver lining. And so ultimately I was able to, and this isn't like something that happened overnight. This is something that took a couple years for me to kind of work out. But what I realized, this went from, in my mind, I transitioned from this being the worst thing that ever happened to me to being the most important thing that ever happened for me. And what I appreciated is that through this experience of being a personal injury victim, I got to have such a greater understanding of the harms and losses that our clients suffer, that get inflicted upon our clients, and really what they truly go through. Because, before, as a lawyer, I was always empathetic. I mean, I always cared about my clients. I mean, that's not like a new thing, but I don't think I really understood the true magnitude of what it means to have your health stolen from you. And it's one thing if, something happens, like, say, for example, you make certain lifestyle choices, whether it's, maybe smoking or alcohol or obesity or whatever, and then you get sick. But it's really quite another when it's something that didn't have to happen, that somebody kind of does to you because they weren't careful, because they didn't do their job right, or they just weren't paying attention on the road that day. And so I realized that there was a real opportunity for me to understand more three-dimensionally what our clients experience, what the real losses are. And what I realize is, like, now as a lawyer, I can tell their story better. As lawyers, we're storytellers. This is what we do. We tell a story to an insurance company. And if they don't want to buy the claim, we share the client's story potentially with a jury, and let them decide on the claim. And now, through the wisdom of my own experience, I'm better able to help my clients, because I don't directly tell the story. I'm sort of the director, and they're the star of the show, but I'm able to help them to understand truly what's taken, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Makes sense, Mr. Dave. So, finding your voice in the chaos of hospital and expert, how did you learn to advocate for yourself when you were the most vulnerable?
I think that it's sort of that's a great question, and I think that was probably the most difficult thing was that I really wasn't. There was a point in time where I was getting sick. Before I was real sick, and where I was still able to sound kind of like I sound now. I was still strong minded. I was still able to, really advocate for myself. But what I realize is it's kind of like when you get sick or you get hurt, particularly suddenly and unexpectedly, like most traumatic accidents, it's your agency and your ability to advocate for yourself gets taken from you. Like you can very, very quickly lose that. And I have to say, when you depend on others, whether it's your family members or your friends to be your advocate, they're never going to advocate the way that you would advocate for yourself. And I think, that's a real struggle, because I feel like, when you're an injured victim, and I'm not talking about like some little soft tissue, minor injury. When I'm talking about these very significant, life-changing, life-altering, catastrophic injuries, and you don't really have anybody to advocate for you. And that's why I feel like it's so critically important to have a personal injury lawyer, particularly, when it is the result of traumatic injury, be there to be an advocate for you. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of personal injury lawyers, they don't really appreciate what the clients are going through, or they don't have that real understanding. And I think I was guilty of that prior to my situation. I was just like a lot of them, where I didn't really get it. Again, I felt bad for them, but there's a gulf of difference between really understanding and feeling bad. And I think, for me, in a lot of ways, I thank God, because, I feel like he just kind of through this experience, he just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, there's a lot more that you're missing here. You're just average. You're just scraping the very tip of the iceberg, but there's that stuff that's below the waterline that you can't see, that is literally destroying your clients' lives, and that's where you need to focus on." And those elements of what we call legal damages, those elements of pain and suffering, or what we refer to in the industry as non-economic damages, which is, the physical pain, the physical suffering, the mental anguish, the emotional distress, the disability, and ultimately the catch-all, which is loss of enjoyment of life. And I think, if you've always enjoyed life, it's hard to help somebody express the loss of enjoyment of life in a meaningful way, because it's like, any lawyer can just say, "Oh, well, what are the things that you can't do that you used to be able to do, or what are the things that are more difficult?" But when you start to really understand, as I said, more three-dimensionally, and you're able to cut through all of that and get to the real story. What is it like to be a dependent? What is it like to have your spouse turned into your caretaker? How does that make you feel that you may never work again? How does that make you feel that you can't provide anymore for your 3-year-old daughter? How does it make you feel that you wake up every day, and before like when you wake up, your day's already ruined because you're in so much pain, and the whole night you didn't sleep because you're in so much pain, and you can't get comfortable anymore, and you're angry and you're upset, and the whole world is coming at you. And I think having an advocate that understands that kind of loss, and that can help the client, as I mentioned, it's not my story, it's our client's story. And I'm a better director now, and I'm better able to help our clients frame the magnitude of their loss in a way that is understandable, in a way that's impactful, and in a way that will get them the compensation that they deserve from an insurance company. Or if the insurance company refuses that, then certainly in front of a jury.
Mr. Dave, as Oregon personal injury attorney as well as a founder, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
I guess, my short-term goal is, we're relatively new in the Oregon area. I'm in the process of, I fell in love with Oregon. I have family in Oregon, and I'm in the process of relocating my family from Florida to Oregon. And so, my short-term goal is to get more. We're supposed to be moving in June. I'm very excited about that. And my short-term goal is to, successfully move my family, find a new home for us in the Oregon area, and build our practice and really become part of a contributing part of the local community, particularly in the Portland area where our office is located. And I would say that's the short-term goal. In the long-term goal, we're looking to build a practice that is different from the typical personal injury practice, and we already do that. We just want to get the word out. We practice with empathy, we practice with caring, we practice with understanding. And the thing that I'd say that we're really, really good at is communication, because the communication piece, particularly with people who are injured and they're going through an experience in their life that they've never experienced before, it's so important that they have consistent, steady communication, so they always understand where they are in their case, where they are in the evolution in the life cycle, and they understand why we're doing what we're doing and why they need to do what they need to be doing. And we just want to build a practice that's just built on integrity and commitment to our clients that is really second to none in the Oregon market.
Second to none, and good luck to your goals and looking forward for more success, Mr. Dave. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is, just dream big, and then just take bold action to fulfill your dreams, because otherwise you're just wishing for stuff that's probably never going to happen. You just got to take big risks and be willing to kind of put yourself out there, doing the stuff that is you're uncomfortable with, and really pushing yourself beyond what you think your limits are. And I'd say, to me, I've enjoyed the greatest success when I come outside of my comfort zone, or what I call the cocoon of mediocrity, which is our comfort zone, and really just strive for excellence and accept nothing less. Because I'm not competing with anybody else. I'm competing with myself. And I'm always looking to be better. I'm always striving to improve. And the other piece of advice is that I would give anybody is, don't do it for the money. We run a personal injury practice. I have a lot of financial obligations. I've got payroll. I've got a lot of stuff, but it needs to be about something more than just chasing money. And for me, it gets down to, I remember when I was at my sickest, from what my own experience. And I remember I just, I was begging God for a second chance and please just get me through this. I live in gratitude that I did get a second chance. And I am so grateful that I still have my family, that I'm still here, that I'm still productive as a lawyer, as a husband, as a father. And I never lose sight of that. I never lose sight of the gratitude. And I live with it every day, because I see, I see a lot of stuff in the scope of our practice, which is so much worse than anything I went through. And, I thank God, and I live my life in service of our clients, and just being the best that we can do in terms of helping them, as mentioned, getting through this, getting compensated, and then also in their own way, finding purpose in their pain and their injuries.
Well, thank you for that advice, Mr. Dave. Thank you, thank you. And can you please recommend a book that influenced your journey?
Well, there's been many. I would say that there's an older book. Well, it's really old. It's like from the 1920s or 1930s or something like that. A book by
A classic.
Napoleon Hill,
Okay.
Think and Grow Rich. That's probably one of the most important books that I've ever read. And that really, I mean, a lot of it is about making money and that kind of stuff, but the real underlying message was one of in order to achieve success in life, in whatever endeavor, whether it's in the law or medicine or really anything, it's more, the most important thing is mindset, believing in yourself, persistence, grit, and determination. And there's a story in the book, and he talks about Napoleon Hill, the author, talks about there was a guy. He was a very successful guy, and this was during the gold rush out in Colorado, and he went and bought himself a gold mine, and he essentially they hit a vein, and they were doing really well for a while, and then all of a sudden the vein went dry, and they couldn't find any more gold. And they searched and they searched, and they couldn't find it, and they eventually gave up. And he sold all of his equipment to some local guy, and the local guy it turns out, was pretty smart. And what he did was he went out and he hired an engineer to do a survey. And apparently they found the vein again, and it was literally 3 feet from where they had stopped looking. And it turned out to be the biggest vein in I think certainly in, I think it was Colorado history, and possibly in the history of this country. And the messaging was, you never quit. You don't stop 3 feet from gold. And I think that more than anything is, again, it's not about the money. It's not about the gold. The lesson is, when we quit, we're never, we're like most people. I wouldn't say most people, but a lot of people, at the first sign of any kind of serious headwind, they just give up and they quit. And I think more than anything, and as I tie it back to, what we're talking about today, is I almost quit, and I came really close to quitting and being done. And I'm so glad that I didn't. And I'm really happy that I didn't stop, because now I'm able to enjoy, a life I couldn't even imagine that was possible when I was that ill.
Yes, people try until you succeed. Mr. Dave, thank you for that recommended book. It's so empowering. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in a 6th season, abstract poetry in a 3rd season, and of course, my book 101 review in 6th season as well. Comedy 101 in 4th season, and of course my food 101 in its 6th season as well. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 in 5th season, science 101, sex 101 in its 4th season, and my baby podcast Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, my Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. And Mr. Dave, I'm inviting you to be part of my Law 101. Let's talk about, your expertise, injuries. Okay, if you are interested,
Sure.
please do come over. And please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Dave, for someone listening who is in the thick of the right now, feeling shattered, scared, and stuck, what is the core message of hope and direction you want them to hold on to?
So are we talking about like in the context of like someone who's been in an accident or personal injury,
Yes.
something like that?
Yes, please.
I think the things that the wisdom that I can share is, there's kind of different periods, yeah, of sort of, I guess the mental state. You have that like right after an accident. I think a lot of clients worry about a lot of stuff that is really, relatively or comparatively trivial to their house. So, for example, they tend to get very worked up about their car. They want to know nuances of PIP law, or they're worried about insurance and all this stuff. And what I would say to anybody who's been injured in an accident, I'm not going to say, hey, call Dave Eltringham or ELG Lawyers. What I am going to say is, if you've been in an accident, do your homework. Find yourself a trusted lawyer. Find somebody who's got the good positive reviews on Google. Find somebody who's got a good reputation in the community. Find somebody that maybe a friend had a good experience with, and find them early, especially out in Oregon. I feel like there's a certain trepidation that a lot of injured victims have when it comes to initially hiring a lawyer. And I know there's a lot of, kind of bad publicity that some lawyers have unfortunately generated. And it's kind of like there's a certain level of discomfort. But the best piece of advice that I can possibly give is hire a lawyer quickly after you've been in an accident. You do not want to be dealing with the insurance companies on your own. The insurance companies are not your friend. They are not looking to pay you. They are really looking to avoid paying you, either completely or at least substantially, or finding justification to substantially reduce the amount that they're going to eventually have to pay you. So to me, in my opinion, do your homework, find the right lawyer, and do that, as quickly as possible after you've been in an accident. In no circumstance should you really be having any conversations with the insurance companies, particularly for the at-fault driver's insurance company. Ideally you'd like to avoid that as much as possible, because anything you say they can potentially use against you to devalue your case. And that really, to me, is the most important thing. And then really probably the most important thing, the single most important thing, is go to a doctor. Even if you don't really think you're hurt, have the doctor do a full orthopedic examination on you, or whatever else is needed, and confirm that you're not really hurt. Because a lot of times people don't appreciate they've been in an accident. They don't appreciate that they've been severely injured or even moderately injured. They don't go to a doctor. They don't hire a lawyer. They try to work this stuff out on their own. And invariably that doesn't take them to any place good. It certainly doesn't get them the results that they deserve. And, very often it can really undermine their claim going into the future. So big ticket, go to the doctor, get checked out, even if you don't think you're hurt, and find yourself a lawyer that you can trust to help you through the process, because you're going to need it.
Mr. Dave, thank you so much for that. And can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
I'm sorry, say that again for me?
Yeah, can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or any projects that you're doing right now?
I don't know that other than our serving our clients, we're relatively new in the Oregon market. So we're actually looking for community facing projects to support. And we have actually a couple in mind that we're in talks with right now. So I don't really have anything per se. But if any of your listeners, want to reach out to me, for anything, even just guidance, or to be pointed in the right direction, they can reach me at de@elginjurylawyers.com. And that's going to be the best way to get hold of me.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Dave Eltringham, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this will rise. So, Mr. Dave, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time today. I've enjoyed our talk.
Likewise. Monica people, see you soon.